Yes, welcome to part 2 of our Bloodborne Pathogen training delivered by Osha Safety Consult Nigeria Limited, authorized training partners of Osha Academy. So, on today's training, we're going to be discussing transmitting bloodborne pathogen as well as the ECP, talking about the exposure control plan. Now, on the transmitting bloodborne pathogen, we'll be discussing fluid that spread bloodborne pathogens, fluids that do not spread bloodborne pathogens, and how bloodborne pathogens are transmitted. Then we'll end the chapter with a case scenario. Now, fluids that spread bloodborne pathogens. I said there are certain fluids, bodily fluids that can transmit pathogens, and they include the blood, which is the most common of them all, and the one we'll be discussing about all through the period of this training so far. We also have the cerebral spinal fluid, talking about the fluid that is found on the brain region and also on the spinal cord region of the body. And also you have the semen and the vaginal secretion, both of which transmit bloodborne pathogen only during sexual contacts or intercourse. You also have fluids that do not spread bloodborne pathogens, and these include the sweat, saliva, urine, and feces. Now, despite the fact that these fluids are known not to transmit pathogens, it is very important that when handling them, we take caution, as we may not be able to tell which of them is mixed with blood. You understand? Now, in some cases of serious abdominal pain, there is tendency of the feces to be mixed with blood, and this can cause an exposure to these pathogens we are talking about, this bloodborne pathogen we are talking about. Anyway, some cases in urine and in saliva, like for the saliva, in cases of people that have serious cough, like tuberculosis, they have been known to also emit blood along with their saliva, you understand? So when you handle such, you have a chance of being exposed if you don't handle it carefully. Then also how blood pathogens are transmitted. You have the occupational way and the non-occupational bloodborne pathogens, and ways of which bloodborne pathogens can be transmitted. Now for the non-occupational way, you have the sexual contact and also sharing of hypodermic needles, talking about the needles that are used to extract blood with the aid of a syringe. Then for the occupational bloodborne pathogens, we have puncture wound from sharps or contaminated objects such as glass, or from splash of the blood of the mucous membrane of the eyes, the nose, or the mouth. So these are some of the ways that this bloodborne pathogen can be transmitted, either in an occupational situation or a non-occupational situation. You say protecting yourself from all bodily fluids. Now, decontamination is one of them. Now, one of the things we have to take note of is the fact that for a pathogen like the hepatitis B virus, they have the tendency of staying in surfaces for up to 7 days and still being potent to carry bloodborne pathogens or transmit bloodborne pathogens. Understand? So it is very important that we decontaminate every surface or object that might have been contaminated immediately to reduce or remove or eliminate the risk of being infected. Then also understand how bloodborne pathogens are transmitted. Understand the various ways they can be transmitted and the various fluids that have the potential of transmitting these bloodborne pathogens. Understand? Also be aware of taking caution with even those fluids that are said to not be able to transmit these pathogens, but you should be aware of taking caution in handling them as well, and avoid direct or indirect contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials as well. Now, here is a case study. So Jasmine is a daycare worker taking care of children between the ages of 6 months to 12 months. Kevin, a 3-year-old child at the daycare center, has been complaining of stomach ache. Suddenly, he begins to vomit. After Kevin parents had been called to pick him up, Jasmine was told to clean the mess. Now, the question is, should Jasmine be concerned about a bloodborne pathogen, and why, depending on your answer. So next we discuss the exposure control plan, talking about the ECP, and under that we'll be talking about the additional component of ECP, and then a case study as well. Now, under the exposure control plan, it is a requirement in the OSHA Act, understand? And its purpose is to eliminate or minimize employee exposure to bloodborne pathogens. It can be found under the 29 Code of Federal Regulation 1910 30C of the bloodborne pathogen standard, understand? Now it is a requirement, the ECP is a requirement by OSHA in that particular standard, and the purpose is for it to eliminate and minimize employee exposure to bloodborne pathogen. Now, it says also the written ACP outlines strategies necessary to eliminate or minimize occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens. That is its function, and they have outlined strategy that can help in eliminating and minimizing occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens. And these strategies said it includes site-specific plan that identify all employee classification which have occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Under this, what they meant is that all employees all employees that have the tendency of being exposed to this bloodborne pathogen should all be outlined. Understand? Every employee that has that tendency of being exposed, bring them out, classify them, and let them be known. You understand? Then also appropriate training should be given. All these employees that have the tendency of being exposed, they should be properly trained. You understand? Communication of hazards that are involved in their job should be well communicated to them in the language they will understand, as well as materials that they are going to be using should also have ways of communicating the various hazards that are associated with them as well. Then vaccination. Vaccination is the surest means to prevent against this bloodborne pathogen, particularly the hepatitis B virus. Understand? So every of such worker that have the tendency of being exposed, the employer should ensure that they are vaccinated. Understand? Then procedures for investigation, evaluation, and follow-up should also be put in place. Understand? Investigation and evaluation aid we aid in trying to find ways to make sure such cases do not occur again. Understand? You find through your investigation, you're able to find better means to ensure that such cases do not occur again. And once any incident occur, immediately you investigate and evaluate and follow up immediately. Follow up the case immediately to ensure that such things do not occur again. Then proper record keeping and sharp object log. There's an additional component of an ECPR, engineering and work practice control. Engineering control is talking about trying to use equipment to isolate or eliminate the exposure to such hazard. Like for instance, using of your face guard to eliminate every potential of a splash, understand? Splash coming in contact with your eyes, mouth, and your nose. So by this using your face guard, you've eliminated or isolated such a situation. And also having a sharp a sharp container where you can keep all your needles and all those things to prevent having contacts with contaminated ones of them, you understand? So that's what the engineering is talking about, using equipment to try and eliminate or isolate any form of exposure. Then also the work practice code, we're talking about how you can carry out your work safely without putting yourself at risk. Understand? For instance, putting on of your glove, wearing your glove to do your works that involve blood and other opiums, understand? And also how to remove that glove properly and dispose it properly. Now, all these are talking about the work practice control, how to do your work properly to eliminate any chance of being exposed to those bloodborne pathogens. They also have the personal protective equipment, the PPE, which should be worn, and also the employer should be trained on how to wear them. Employees should be trained on how to wear them appropriately as well. Then housekeeping, that is to say, the environment, the work environment should always be kept clean. It is the art of keeping the working environment clean and free from every form of infectious material. the containment and labeling potential infectious materials. The materials that are hazardous should be well labeled. It's a way of communicating those hazards to people that will be using those materials to ensure they use them appropriately and carefully as well. So that the ECP must be reviewed and updated annually. In the course of your investigation, should in case any form of accident occur, you will have better ways of curtailing such situation and also preventing further of it occurring. You understand? So this ECP should be updated. New ideas and new ways of doing things should always be included in it to prevent every form of exposure to these bloodborne pathogens and also make the work to be safer for the employees. Then the recent ECP must be made accessible to all employees as well. And here is a case study to round up. Says Stephen is a new employee for AA Manufacturing. He has been hired as a supervisor to oversee line production on the Swift shift. As a supervisor, he is expected to provide emergency medical care if an employee becomes injured or sick. Now the question is, should Stephen's position be classified as having occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens, and why is your answer? So we end here for today. Thank you very much for your time. We meet again for the concluding part. Thank you.